Good evening, family and friends. Welcome to our Masterclass Moments, our visual podcast. What is that called? A webisode, right? All right. Welcome so much. Do me a favor. Please do me a favor. Would you please like this post, share this post, and tag someone in the chat? We're getting ready to have a really rich conversation, both with Dr. G and Dr. J coming to the virtual stage. So in case you don't know who I am, I'm the Reverend Dr. Dominique Aisha Robinson, and I have been the special host of the Just Enough Light Masterclass Moments podcast for the first and second season. And I am delighted to bring to the stage the one and only Dr. Joel B. Kemp. Will you put your Facebook virtual hands together as he comes to the stage? And for those who listen, this is how I usually look when I say,
I was going to do the little sarcastic thing and put your hands together and go.
and they say, give him one. That's right. The clap. Yes, Dr. J is in the building, and Dr. J is about to bring in Dr. G to the platform because I got questions to start the podcast today. I already got questions. I'm already ready with the questions.
Right, you got to dive in on the Thanksgiving world and some.
I do. I got questions. So let's bring Dr. G to the stage. Exactly. And we shouldn't even have to really introduce the woman of God. You've been listening to our podcast, which if you haven't, you're whack and you need to get a part of the family. You need to subscribe and be a part of it. But just in case you haven't been introduced to Dr. G, Dr. J is going to introduce her for those of you who are streaming to get to know the woman of God.
Exactly. So we have the privilege for this season 2 of spending the last couple of episodes with Dr. Gail N. Kemp, aka Dr. G. Among many accolades, she's an assistant professor, clinical psychology at Mercer University's College of Health Professions, is licensed here in the great state of Georgia, focusing on work particularly with anxiety related for children and young adults. We'll talk a little bit about some of the work she's doing related to mental health and race as our conversation today. And as I mentioned during our last one, I have the great honor of calling this amazing woman not only my best friend, but my beloved wife that I've been honored to be with for, a little over 11 years now. So we officially introduced Dr. Gail N. Kemp, aka Dr. G. The crowd goes wild.
Pleasure to be with you all back on the Masterclass Moments podcast. Excited for the conversation.
Yes. So for those of you who are tuning in, again, do us the favor, please comment, drop in the chat where you are. Let us know where you are, where you are in the world, joining us, and any other interesting facts you'd like to share about yourself. Not too much, but whatever you'd like to share.
No oversharing, right?
No overshare. I know people have been in the overshare season, during Thanksgiving, but we can stop that right now. But please comment, share, tag someone. We want to see your comments in the chat. We want to make this as engaging as possible. We want to be able to respond. All right, we got Atlanta, Georgia on the line. We got Maurice saying, "What's up, fam?" Gail, gorgeous. Gael, see? Thank you. So to open up today's dialogue and conversation, this is the question, Dr. G and Dr. J. When is it enough of the Thanksgiving leftovers? When do you stop eating them?
When they're all gone.
Right, exactly. No, for me, I have the 3-day rule.
A 3-day. Okay, so that's Thursday. So we talking about the full weekend to like Sunday?
Yeah, exactly. I figure if 3 days was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for Thanksgiving leftovers. So that's how my mind works.
Well, when do you count the 3 days though, right? Because Thanksgiving shouldn't really count.
Now, Dr. G, you meddling because that's the same question people want to know about Jesus getting off the cross.
Right?
They're like, now, with the 3 days, you meddling.
Right.
People have questions. We got
Boston. I'm just trying to cause trouble.
we got Boston on the line with Jasmine Toussaint on the line. What up? So we got Boston and Atlanta on the line. Thank you. Tag somebody and tell us. Wait, you put the cold face. All right, Jasmine. I'm sorry. It's cold where you are. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's cold where you are. It's
not that cold where we are. But
know,
that's all right. That's right.
All right. So we got 3 days. So does that mean then, Dr. J, that then for Sunday dinner, you don't want what you had for Thanksgiving?
Exactly. by Sunday dinner, I want something fresh. I mean, I'm willing to cook it, so it's not like I'm going to sit back and make other folk do the work. But by Sunday dinner, I want something new.
Dr. G, how do you feel about this? Not his rule. Just when are you done?
Right. I'm okay eating it until it's done.
So even
I might supplement it with other things, but I feel like by 3 days we were all done this year.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. I was going to say, who has leftovers left? We
But
do
what,
not.
like, you know how some people like they cook for an army, so there's like
Right.
tons of food. So would a week be too long for Thanksgiving leftovers?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So when I say when it's done, it's usually probably done within less than a week.
So we don't want no turkey and ham sandwiches going into Wednesday.
No. Although I will say, when I was a kid, my mom used to make this really tasty ham loaf, where you just kind of grind up the ham. So I did like that as a sort of a day 4 kind of snack.
Jasmine put in the comment, as I eat leftovers. Jasmine, we support you.
I know, right?
Right. No judgment.
No judgment at all, because it's probably very economical as well, girl. Please. I'm upset that I'm all the way back in Austin without any leftovers trying to figure out what I'm going to eat, when I'm like, I could have just bought some. I should have bought a Ziploc turkey with me on the airplane or something. But okay, so we got a 3-day rule. For all you Bible scholars out there wrestling about when Jesus really, got up out that grave, that's between you and Dr. J. Dr. J for another conversation.
Hey, we actually did that last season. We talked about
right.
You can go back and check that one out.
You blew people's minds on that one. It was like, whoa! Oh man, it was beautiful, especially when you talked about starting at night. I said, you better talk, Dr. J, talk your stuff. All right, so we got the guidelines around leftovers. Here's the next question about post Thanksgiving. All right, when we get to Sunday and it's supposed a fresh meal, do we eat the same sides that we had for Thanksgiving? Are we still saying, well, I'm gonna eat greens again, or I'm gonna have some more macaroni and cheese? Or at this point, are we saying, I need another cuisine? I need some Italian food or some Mexican food or some Japanese? Are you saying you just want out of this for a little while?
Well, I will start off by saying I finished the mac and cheese on Sunday, so so I was good with it. I was trying to think. I was like, what day is today? I was like, yep, that's what I was eating yesterday. So I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Like, certain sides never go out of style. I feel like,
okay.
That's
like
true.
Mac and cheese. When is that ever wrong? When is cornbread ever wrong? So there are those kinds of things that, my doctor may not want to hear this, but
Oh man, Dr. J, you are so Black sometimes, and I really, really, really appreciate it.
It makes up for the Raisin Bran, right?
I mean, because honestly, the last question I was going to ask was, did you all have cereal during the Thanksgiving break, or
Yep. I had the Raisin Bran, and Dr. G busted out her golden turmeric.
First of all, that needs to be called a parfait. What
a parfait. It probably is more like a parfait. One of those acai bowls.
Right.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's good to see you all in these virtual streets. Though I just saw you all in person in Denver, Colorado.
Right.
We were there for the American Academy of Religion and the Society of Biblical Literature, and you two walking around like Black excellence, scholarship, and love. So you all, you all need to know that like scholars and preachers are more than the people you see in the classroom and the pulpits, and so are our therapists. They're more than the persons you see when you are doing. So it's been such a blessing of getting to know the both of you all in like full personhood or whole beings. Which brings me to the beginning of our conversation around those of us who have had to navigate what it meant to bring our whole selves or negotiate what portions of ourselves needed to be present or available during a season that may have been difficult. So Dr. G, for many people who have been listening, sending questions and discussing, quote unquote, being on the other side of Thanksgiving, knowing that Christmas is approaching and other holiday season, different stressors, financial stressors of like, are you supposed to be purchasing Christmas gifts and trying to save money moving into the new year? I don't know if this would be considered a liturgical season, Dr. Kent, what I'm about to say, Dr. J. Kent, maybe like a cultural season of like Black people moving into this space of preparing for like watch night. cleaning closets, getting rid of things they can't fit anymore, preparing the household for the new year, with all these different things that are pressing us, whether it's finishing the semester as a student or a professor, trying to reassemble our emotions after a visit with family. Talk to us a little bit, Dr. G, on ways that we can recover or reset or reboot after Thanksgiving, if it was difficult, and as we approach this cultural season of renewal and reset.
Yeah, I think kind of some of the ways that folks can reset from the hustle and bustle of Thanksgiving, and if you, for those who might have jumped into the Black Friday uh, fun and sanity somewhere in between the two, I think many of the ways to reset is to just take a moment to um, pull back from it all, and it can be easy to have all the expectations, the messages, the commercial aspect of it almost drive you without even you really consciously thinking about it. You're sort of just running on assumed patterns that you're supposed to follow, and engaging in behaviors according to some societal rules. And the question that may be important to ask oneself is to step back and say, why? And what is really important right now? What do I need to prioritize? How am I doing? Checking in with one in a space where you need to have some time, some quiet time alone. Um, how do you need, or how are you reaching out to folks who kind of don't drain you, but help to build you up? Kind of. So I'm cautious of saying it's important. Connecting with others is important, but making the right connections are particularly important. We all know you've got connections that can drain you more than they can replenish you. So
Yeah.
those are some of the things.
Yeah. Dr. J, were you getting ready to say something?
Yeah, when Dr. G was talking about sort of connecting with the right people who don't drain you, one of the things that one of my previous mentors in seminary would often say is notice how many times Jesus went by himself, that he just left folk, that there's a certain kind of rhythm to spending quality time alone,
Mm.
particularly alone with you in Christ, where you can have that kind of reframing, reformatting of your kind of agendas, right? So you were talking earlier about this idea of ritual. Well, there is a kind of ritual in the sense that it's a kind of rhythm that
Mhm.
defines what's important.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the questions is always like, who's defining that rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is Black Friday really a sacred thing that you have to do, or is
Why
that?
is it even called Black? Does anybody know that?
I don't know why it's called Black Friday.
It's
My assumption is
it's
because it makes a
finances,
lot of
right?
money. Yeah.
Right.
So to be in the black financially is a good thing. One of the few times being in the black is positive in American culture.
That's it, people of God. Y'all know I'm coming to preach it one day, so just don't even try to take it. If you try to take it, I'm going to talk about you on the YouTube channel. Back to the
Are
ritual.
you planning a sermon already related to that?
Already in the few times that Black is good, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Well, Black is always good to us, but
Right.
the few times that I was like, Black Friday, huh? It's interesting. That's good. I'm glad to know. All right, businesses are not in the red. Oh, thank you
Mhm.
so much, Bruce Lee, for teaching me. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm always a student. I'm going to ask questions. You want to know why? Because my teachers told me there's no such thing as stupid questions. And now as a professor, I don't know if I agree, but I appreciate but I appreciate
Many
you.
of your students are on the line. They may they may want to weigh in.
They better listen clearly. No. No, all right. So Dr. J, you're talking about this ritual and routine of stepping back. And
Right.
I really appreciate you highlighting, where Jesus took some time to retreat and be by himself and reset. So that's very, very powerful. And it's always so interesting, the juxtaposition of the cultural rhythms in comparison to the liturgical rhythm that is expected in Advent of
Right.
waiting and this sense of silence and um, anticipation, but anticipation without anxiety in some ways, or supposedly. And so it's really interesting of what the Christian calendar or the Christian liturgical season demand or expects of us or teaches us in light of the cultural season, as Dr. G highlighted. This, it's like, I mean, I don't think we were past Halloween when they started playing Christmas music and telling us
Right.
about the sales. And it puts you supposedly into this mindset of like, one, having to spend money and going to all the holiday gatherings and just to me, it's like the season of being spent in every capacity, whether mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, all the things. And as we look at the actual calendar, we see like Christmas is on a Sunday, watch night is on a Saturday, and what some would call Emancipation Sunday is like the very next Sunday. So that last week of December, it's it it's like where do we find the rest to reset spiritually, mentally, emotionally? And so, Dr. G, I want to go back to something you highlighted. You talked about asking yourself some questions, like the why, which is, some of us, and we start to get really honest about the why. The next prayer is for the courage to step back then, or to really make the difference, to do what's next. Tell us some more questions we should ask ourselves to help us recenter and reset. What are some more things we should just either ask ourselves or maybe ask people that we love that we see are getting spent in this season?
Absolutely, absolutely. And part of that why is reflecting on what your values are and what's important to you. Sometimes we can find ourselves either in a harried mode or even in conflict with each other because we are we might be going after a value, but maybe going after it in a way that's different from what somebody else has in mind, and that can create uh, it can create kind of unnecessary friction and conflict. And then sometimes just stepping back and reassessing things and asking, okay, what's my aim here, can help to clarify. I'm thinking of situations where perhaps in families or in couples or in relationship, um, where there might be something that two individuals are attempting to resolve, but and they have the same aim in mind but are doing it in different ways, and then end up kind of in conflict over that. Stepping back to say, okay, what is our aim, may allow folks to see, okay, we have the same goal, we have the same value, we're just approaching it and from different routes, but we have the same destination in mind. So remembering what you are aiming for can be helpful, just individually and relationally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, are there any resources we should be aware of or mindful of as we are resetting, rebooting, centering ourselves, as some would say in the good old Pentecostal church I grew up in? What's the prophetic word we should be aligning ourselves with as we move into, God is going to do this in the next 5 weeks. So what are the ways that we should be what are some resources that we can tap into for us to, align ourselves?
Right. Well, you know, not to kind of beat a I don't want to say beat a dead horse. It's such a negative, it's such a graphic picture, but um, connecting with our communities, that is definitely something that folks can do. And uh, if you are in a space where you need more than just perhaps time with loved ones, or maybe even time by yourself is not quite doing it, and maybe you're experiencing a level of stress or anxiety that is interfering and distressing for you, um, reach out to connect to therapy services. You'll see posted on, I believe it's going to be posted on the website.
Yes, or it
Some
might come up now, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, wait, I got this coming up on the website. No, okay. Yeah.
I thought on the website, yeah, yes. So you'll see on the website some references to dealing with stress in the holidays, as well as some links on how to find a therapist, how to
Mm,
also investigate what therapies are effective, what particular types of interventions are effective for different types of challenges. And you'll see that there's a link that's focused on adults, and then there's a link focused on children as well. And so those are resources that folks can utilize to see what types of help they might find for themselves, or even just to learn about what can be helpful.
Awesome sauce. Dr. J, you want to drop your website for the people who are listening so they know where to go to get the resources?
Yeah, exactly. Go to JEL.institute. So JEL.institute is where we'll have some of these services that are available. Again, as part of our goal of just enough light for the step we're on, is to recognize that Christ's light comes in a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
And so our goal is to be as holistic as we can be in all of the work that we do. So we're going to make those resources available to you on the website. And obviously, you can reach out to me directly, and I can put you in touch with Dr. G to help navigate some of the things as necessary and as appropriate.
Actually, we'll see y'all if you can talk to Dr. J to get to Dr. G, because they have a business and an administrator, and y'all got to go through the process. You can't just reach out to the fancy people. But Dr. G, are you taking on new clients?
I am at the stage where I am taking on clients, and so I am. I expect most of my clients will be children and adolescents. However, I do work with adults as well, and so I don't. I have a website that will go live soon, within the next 24 hours. But yes, I am
Okay.
taking clients.
And we will be able to check out the Just Enough Light social media pages to be able to get Dr. G. Kemp's information. Now, Dr. G, this is another question I'm asking for the pastors in the area. If we are looking, as if I'm a pastor in the Atlanta area, but y'all know, first of all, I slightly am, for anybody who's on this line acting like I slightly am, like the executive pastor over at Shaw Temple Amy Zion Church. Ask the pastor. Anyway, Dr. G, we would like to know, for the churches in Atlanta and maybe even beyond Georgia, do you do not necessarily therapy sessions, but like group workshops for young people who might be navigating emotions during this season and this time? Being a former youth pastor, I relied heavily on outsourcing for those for mental health care and other practices to create a village and a network. And I remember how powerful it was to be able to bring someone in for my students or my kids to talk to, and for them to receive just kind of direction and resource, though not clinical, but just resources and conversation. So are you available for the churches in the area for workshops and sessions in the coming weeks or months ahead?
Absolutely. And that actually relates to two projects that are going on. One that I'm working on with some students over at Mercer University. And then one, I don't know if Dr. J wants to, if that was part of what we might speak on today, but I'll speak about the Mercer one.
Okay.
So, well, we can do both. So I'm definitely, I am available just individually, but also what we're developing over at with some students in my lab are some kind of some psychology 101, some mental health 101, mental wellness 101 workshops. And there'll be a series of workshops that we plan on providing as just a service to the community, to local churches in the area that want to reach out and bring in me and some of my students to provide some information. We'll look at some myths, mental health myths, and then just work on clarifying some of those myths. And really, the aim is to have a dialogue with folks, and then to leave folks with some resources afterwards. So we'll have a pamphlet with some local information.
Awesome. This is rich. And listen, the pastors and leaders on the line, y'all need to go ahead and make sure you follow us on social media. And make sure you save the tab, the website in your browser, so that you'll be able to receive this information and hop on it, because I'm telling you, you're going to want these resources, not just for your church, but for your community, whoever you're connected to, so that you don't feel like you're doing the work alone, one, as a faith leader. But in addition to that, you also need the support as well. And so God has given several gifts in the body of Christ, and we're just grateful to be connected to two amazing gifts. Dr. G, I want to clarify something for our listeners. I know that mental health support is for everyone, but you do some nuanced work for people of color, correct?
So the work that I think you are speaking of is some of the research that I'm doing in particular that will transition into some clinical work. But right now, it's a research project looking at the ways. Well, there are several things that I think relate to what you're talking about. So one, research on the acceptability of the standardized interventions that we have among African American populations. And so this is involving focus groups, surveys, things along those lines of just getting feedback from communities that may not have always been represented in our research studies when we test out the effectiveness and the acceptability of these treatments. And then the second line of work that I am beginning to move into is to consider and to really kind of build on some of the work that's being done already to help equip Black folk in particular, but then also individuals from oppressed backgrounds more broadly to see the ways in which there is a narrative in the broader society that can be internalized or appropriated to a detrimental effect on the individual. And so identifying when that happens and ways to combat that. And so I'm looking to collaborate with researchers and clinicians who have begun to do this work already. That's kind of the next phase of work that I'll be doing that I expect to be applying for a grant for within the next 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. That's part of when you're asking earlier about some of the work we've done together, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's some of what we've done sort of in churches when we were in Massachusetts, right? So, for the kind of the framework of that, we would often use the Romans 12 about don't be conformed or don't let the world squeeze you into its mold.
Dr. J, you use the New Testament scripture?
Every now and again,
Is he allowed? Uh-oh.
It's our secret. Just don't let anyone else know.
Right.
But part of using that scripture is a way of thinking about, if you're from minoritized backgrounds, there's a narrative about who you are, how much you value, and where you sit in not only the human economy, but in God's economy. And so there's a way in which we have to be reinforced and armed to fight against that. And so this whole idea, what does it mean to have your mind renewed? That some of that relates to this process that Dr. G does with cognitive behavioral therapy. Then obviously I bring from it kind of a biblical and ancient Near Eastern perspective on what it means to wrestle with our hearts, what it means to wrestle with that part of us that shapes how we make decisions. So to try to give you spiritual and soulful resources to begin that process.
This is all great. I cannot wait. So Dr. J, what was the part that Dr. G was verifying that you were going to share?
So I think what you were talking a little bit about was some of the work we've been doing around Psalm 42 and helping people deal with questions of depression.
Let me pull up this scripture. Psalm 42, you say, man of God.
Yes,
Okay.
Gotta have a text for everything.
Listen, all you preachers on the line, get your pen and pad, because all right.
So as a random preaching footnote, not on Psalm 42, but when you're talking earlier about black is good, it made me think of the passages about, and God will hide me under the shadow. And so the idea of a shadow being dark, but being a good thing.
Yes. And you know what else I thought about? Yes, I thought about what was, I can't remember the portion, but the time where God pulls Moses into the darkness.
Oh, we hides him so he can see his back pass behind him.
Yes. Exodus, yeah. And I was like, the darkness was good there. It was protected. Anyway, y'all don't take my preaching moments. I promise you, I will come for you. Dr. G and Dr. J are really saved and they love the Lord and they are going to heaven. I'm still working on my way to heaven. So if you take any of this stuff right now, you're going to catch these hands. And I'm not talking about laying prayer. So, anyway. All right. So you were saying this other aspect of the work that you all are doing. You were saying the framework for it is Psalm 42.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And so the first kind of like 5 or 6 verses of it
Uh-huh.
that talk about sort of the psalmist talking to his own soul, but why is my soul? Why are you cast down? Why are you disquieted?
Uh-huh.
He has this kind of beautiful imagery where he plays with water, kind of as the deer longs for water, then crying day and night so that his tears have been his food.
Ooh.
Then there's this reference to sort of God moving over the chaotic waters of the deep. So there's this kind of image of water, of sadness, and this remedy of hope, of hoping in God, trusting in God, depending on how you translate it. And so thinking about this idea that one of the things that we have discovered in the work we've done, and I would say first and foremost in our own lives, is at times there's this narrative that you can't take all of your emotions to God. That somehow God only wants to talk to you when you're happy. But when you're angry, when you're sad, God can handle that too. And so I think one of the powers of the Psalms, at least for me, and other scholars have written about this as well, is they are raw, right? This is not the PG version. This is not Veggie Tales, right? The psalmist, right, will say, "Blessed is the one who dashes your little ones against the rock." Like that's right. Again, because you pray, it don't mean God's going to say yes, but it is an honest expression of emotion, and that expression has its own kind of catharsis, its own kind of therapeutic value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 'cause part of what we were kind of reflecting on was the importance of seeing and recognizing, acknowledging. Okay, for 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 folk who are the Bible is important. Is where are folk dealing with emotions and intense emotions in the Bible, and how is that wrestled with? So it's not just a story of a person and that you know the facts about, but what are these real emotions that are being represented here? And so this one kind of was something we were recently reflecting on, of where we see psalmist saying, talking to, like, what's up with you? Like, why are you? I had to ask my soul, what's going on? Why are you so down? Why are you disquieted? Um, then I had to take that to I had to ask my questions to the Hebrew scholar among us and say, like, this whole casting down and disquieting, this sounds like an intense low. And so uh, Dr. J was speaking on that with you
Yeah,
on this day.
yeah, exactly. And
Allie.
so right, and so and so part of kind of the Hebrew there, particularly one of its Aramaic root or connection. So Aramaic is one of the other sort of ancient languages where the Hebrew Bible was written in.
Wait a minute, man of God. You said one of the other what kind of languages?
Ancient
Uh,
languages, so old,
I
long.
didn't know what word you said, but I wanted the people to hear you clearly. The man of God over here will use these, $10 Hebrew words, and you got to go back and you got to write them out phonetically, people of God, and look them up. But okay, so ancient, we should all know ancient. Everybody should be on the same page.
Right. And also it's the language that many New Testament scholars think Jesus would have spoken.
Wait a minute, Dr. J. I don't know if you were being shady or not. When you say they think, does that mean that that it wasn't the truth, or?
So no one has a voice recording of Jesus.
Okay.
So right, so we can't just like old school days pop into the cassette player and listen to it.
Okay.
But based upon when he lived, where he lived, kind of the dominant language was Aramaic. So we kind of
Do you believe that?
yeah.
Okay, well,
That
I
makes
didn't know if it was shady for the New Testament scholars.
no,
Listen,
not at all.
You
Not
didn't
at
know
all.
if he was stirring the pot.
I didn't know. That's why I was like, now wait a minute, Dr. Jerry. I don't know you to be as petty as me, but that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. That was my hermeneutic, as we would identify in this conversation. That was not Dr. J's actual execution. That was my hermeneutic, everyone.
Right.
So, all right, Aramaic is the language of the day. And so what's the word we're looking at?
So the word that means to be cast down, in Aramaic has the connection of being kind of thrown to the grave. So there's a connection between that and death, in certain parts of it. And so part of what Dr. G and I were talking about is this idea of being cast down or brought to the ground, right? If the psalmist is playing with that image of not just being brought low, but almost being brought to the point of death, then a lot of interpreters, and I think there's good reason to do so, will think about this psalm as a kind of case study or an example of, if not a full-blown clinical depression, but at least dealing with kind of low mood, low affect. And how then can we see how the psalmist works through this as a way of us thinking about working through it in our own individual lives and in our community lives.
Oh, this is gonna be good. So this work that the two of you are doing, what shall we call it? What is it called?
We have no good name
yet. Giving it a name yet. I guess that's what you, Dominic, you're the one naming.
What? Well, we're opening it up to our listeners. We might have a prize to anybody who has the best name for this part of Just Enough Light in the Kemps and Kemps business. Okay, so if you have a great name or suggestion, we'd love to hear it. We might even make it a question in our IG stories for you to put the answers in there. We'd love to hear it. And you all have heard it's coming with the framework of Psalm 42. There's the play on the word of water, this cast down, potentially a case study of clinical depression and or like a low affect. So think of those things and give us some hashtags or some names for the Kemp and Kemp enterprise that we're building over here. And we'd love to hear your suggestions for our viewers and listeners. As we,
right, I'm sure they'll come up with something better than emotions in the Bible.
Right.
that wasn't wasn't the name we talked about it. Don't worry about that.
Hey, what do you expect from generically? Right. What do you expect from a brother who loves Raisin Bran?
Oh, are there any Cocoa Puff people on the line? Help us. We need a little.
But I do have to say, Kev on stage came to my defense.
You know what?
That we are on the same page.
First of all, y'all, let me tell you what's blessing me right now. That Dr. J is talking like him and Kevin on stage are best friends, and he said he came to his defense. Y'all, first of all,
that's how I heard it.
There you go.
Kevin on stage, should you ever get to this or we splice this and we tag you, I want you to know, man of God, I was so hurt when I saw you do your cereal ranking and end it with Raisin Bran. Right. Dr. J and I, we haven't really been arguing. We just agreed to disagree on this for quite some time. Then here you come with your ranking and you make it number one. I don't understand you and I don't understand Dr. J in that aspect. I still love the both of y'all, but Kev, I'm praying for you.
Hey, what's the good book say? We're 2 or 3.
That or is making me. I'm questioning y'all. Okay, as we move towards the conclusion, ish. Y'all like that ish part for the listeners? It's the ish, which means kind of like the Black Baptist preacher who's like, I'm closing now, and there's 2 more closes, so give us a minute. What I would want to do is talk to you two a bit about, from both of your perspectives. Dr. J, I know you have written, and it's been published, commentary from using Hebrew scriptures as we discuss Advent.
Yes.
The reason, obviously, we want to keep Dr. G on the line is Advent, in some ways, is about a pregnant woman with her. Are they married yet? He's betrothed, right? They're not married.
Not married yet.
Well, her fiance that she ain't pregnant by. This is the Maury episode. This is my translation. She went to church and got pregnant by the Holy Spirit. Now she back with Joseph, and they on the run. Not on the run, but they're like it's a census happening. Which, as you can imagine, causes a lot of emotion, anxiety, moments of question. For those who are listening who have mothered or are like, a lot of emotions are involved in that. For the men on the line, and you ain't never know if you was really the father, I'm talking to you too. So talk to from both of your perspectives. I'm gonna start with you, Dr. J, as we are in this season of Advent, preparation, anticipation, hope, and light. Even as we consider Christmas, right? People are moving to all the merriness. What do we do balancing that with the undercurrent of society? Here we are, just in this past week of Thanksgiving, the mass shootings that have occurred in, at the Walmart and Colorado Springs. We're still dealing with the shootings of the University of Virginia students. And for the Black culture, we have noticed in the past several years the indictments or killings of Black persons around the holiday season. You know, they're like Mike Trayvon Martin was Black Friday, not Trayvon Martin. Just Jordan Davis was killed on Black Friday, and I think the verdict around one of Trayvon Martin's, like it all happened around this time in this season. So, from both of your perspectives, how do we deal with the light and the merriment and some of the undercurrent that's still happening within our lives that aren't so joyful?
Yeah, I'll do the first piece. Then there's another piece that we do together that I think kind of connects in some of the racial pieces that you brought up at the end. So I think I may have mentioned this in our last podcast, right? That hope is only needed when there are reasons for despair. And so, the image in Isaiah about those in great darkness, those in darkness have seen a great light, right? There's a reality that I always appreciate about scripture is that it doesn't sugarcoat anything, right? This isn't sort of the Mary Poppins Disney version where everything turns out happy and there's never any sorrow, challenges, what have you. It's right into the middle of all of those kind of despairing moments that God shows up most powerfully. And that's part of what Advent means. And so the couple of things that are available on Working Preacher, um, where I talk about in Book of Isaiah, one of the prophecies of Jesus is set against the destruction of Israel, where literally people are being kidnapped, they're being tortured, they're being taken from their homes, water supplies are being cut off to starve them. And into the midst of that world, the prophet Isaiah says God sees something about Israel, sees something about Judah, then gives this promise of this new king. And so the very promise of Christ is set against the backdrop of the very kinds of precarious circumstances you were describing. When mothers are losing sons, fathers are losing daughters, it's into that precise moment that God intervenes, right? And so I'll resist the urge to preach, but right, like if that's not the gospel, I don't know what is. And so I think part of what I often encourage individuals and communities when I'm speaking either in churches or Bible studies or what have you is to take seriously the context out of which these scriptures emerged. And what you will see is that they're not giving you kind of a fancy or a fantasy. They're giving you a grounded hope that's deeply rooted in the kind of the muddiness, the murkiness of life. And so if, you know, the old preachers in my tradition would say, if God did it for Daniel, why not every man? And so, again, God did it once. Why can't God do it again? And that to me is what Advent really is about. And a couple of commentaries I wrote was trying to get people to think through just how intense and how precarious those days were when the prophet gave those words that the New Testament writers understood to also be referencing Christ and his mission.
Dr. J, you want to tell the people where they can find your commentaries?
Yes, sorry. It's on a website called Working Preacher. Uh, and we'll also have that available on our website and on our social media, those links. But I wrote a commentary for, I think, the first and last Sundays in Advent. That's designed for uh, pastors, preachers, laity who want to kind of have a devotional or want to use text as backdrops for preparing for sermons. It gives you a quick kind of 1.5, 2 page um, thoughts on what's happening in the Hebrew text and how we can think about it as it relates to Jesus. So again, workingpreacher.org for the first Sunday of Advent, and I also think the fourth Sunday I did as well.
Yeah, and this kind of conversation about hope makes me think of many conversations that we've had in our home and about the ways in which. So I was undergrad African American studies concentrator and studied under the tutelage of many individuals. One of those being Brother Cornell West, and one of the things that Dr. West often talks about is what does it mean for Black folk, for African Americans to really be in function as a very present and tangible example of what hope looks like, of pressing on in the midst of the hell we've been catching ever since we've been in this nation. Um, and so this also was echoed during the conference that I tagged along to, and the conversation that was had about the role of the Black church. And I think those of you in professional capacities and ministerial capacities in the Black church could speak about that more. But that echo of hope, I think, there's a particularly powerful uh, voice that I think is unique to uh, the Black experience in this nation, that can give a resounding note about hope that is more realistic, that's not Pollyanna-ish, that's not got to pretend everything's fine.
Right.
Yeah,
Because in some ways, the way people tell, even this birthing of Christ story, is really sanitized.
Right.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think it was all three of us were at an event. Was it Friday night?
Hmm.
And it was a Dr. Stephen Ray, I believe it was, who talked about the church as the incubator of hope. And I thought that was just a brilliant three-word phrase, incubator of hope. And what does it mean in this season of Advent that that's what Mary's womb was, right? It was the incubator of hope.
Ooh.
And so how do we
There's a word right there.
People of God, sing your tithes and offerings to just enough light. If I see that hashtag coming up in this Advent season,
right,
I'm coming for you.
right. And so then what does it mean for those of us who are heirs of that hope? How do we be incubators in our own lives and our own communities? And to me, Advent is a chance to refocus on that. And so we talked earlier about how do you find rest? And to me, I would say that's the wrong question, right? It's not how do you find rest, but how do you make places for yourself to rest? That if we keep waiting for things to calm down, then I'll do it. That day will never come. So it's a matter of us making time. You know, take your phones, turn them off. Don't check email. For an hour. Those, or if that's too much,
Right.
just do like half an
Cut
hour.
the scrolling short. Cut the
Yeah,
Instagram scrolling short.
Unless you're going to just enough light.
right.
Right. There you
Exactly.
go.
But even then, right?
Fair.
I can't be
Even then.
hypocritical, right? So even then, pause it, right? Because it's the biggest danger, right? Is good things get in the way of the perfect thing. And so
Mm,
while it may be good to do certain things, the better thing, the more excellent way may be just to be still and to rest and to
mhm,
unplug
Right.
from everything.
mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
What would the two of you say? This has been a bit of a conversation in my preaching class. I did a 2 day or weeks worth of lecture around preaching from the margins or decentering whiteness from the pulpit. And I brought in two colleagues, one Nancy Fausto and one G. Park, who Nancy Fausto is the director of our Latinx Studies program and an Episcopal priest, a practical theologian. G. Park is the United Methodist well, she's not ordained yet, but I'm a United Methodist clergy person, but she's a New Testament scholar. And we were able to share from Korean preaching, Latinx or Hispanic preaching, African American preaching, womanist preaching, feminist. So, and we did some disability work, things of that nature around just kind of the work of preaching from traditional or historically marginalized populations of people. In light of that, one of the themes that the students brought up was this idea or the engagement or relationship with suffering or oppression and how hope plays a role in all of the various preaching styles or formats. But there was this really strong question around what does it mean to not sell cheap hope? Um, and so what would the two of you say to someone who's saying, well, when you just tell somebody, hope is what you need, that's just the easy way out. How do we make hope more tangible? Yeah, how do we make hope more tangible for people who are really seeking to grasp it?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. G.
No, I was gonna say probably from the stance where I am, the question gets to be, in terms of from the clinical realm, the question that you end up trying to explore with an individual is, can you envision things being different? Can you imagine, can you picture what's happening now not being eternal? As in being what you're experiencing now not being forever. Can you picture that? Um, and that's one of the questions that we kind of uh, try to wrestle with. Is is today's troubles, or are today's troubles, um, forever? And troubles, we could definitely argue, are always present. Uh, but the question is, do they need to hem you in, restrict you, confine you, or is there a way in which you can have freedom in the midst of troubles?
Yeah, yeah, and sort of related to that, kind of not letting sort of the myopic view. That is the idea that uh, the suffering can be tunnel vision and trap you as that's the only thing there is. One of the things that we've talked to Gail, Dr. G, and I have talked about, kind of using that Psalm 42, is the psalmist doesn't offer you hope; it's hope in God. And so part of what I think is important is hope in and of itself is meaningless. It's the object in which you place your hope. That's where the power comes from. That's where the ability to see beyond what is in front of you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I often will challenge students or friends, colleagues, what have you. Don't tell me what you're hoping for. Tell me who you're hoping in. And that, so I'm not hoping for, you know, a new house, a new car, right? But my hope has to be in something greater than that.
Mm-hmm,
And so to me, it's about refining that understanding.
mm-hmm.
And then that refined understanding then produces, and I'll borrow from Dr. G's discipline, right? Then that creates behavioral activation. That is, if I believe something, if I hope for something, then I have to do something in light of that.
Right,
And that
right.
doing something in light of it has spiritual, soulful, and physical benefits.
Mm,
So it's not just I'm going to hope today and just keep ginning up hope. It's, well, if I'm hoping today, then that means I need to get up and take a shower, or I need to
please.
get up. I need to get up and fix myself something to eat. I need to get up and go, serve someone at a homeless shelter or whatever it is. There has to be that kind of activation part, so that you don't just sit on your bed as the psalmist did, where his tears were day and night his food. Right? You
Mm.
have to get up off of that.
So, and thank you for sharing that. I love the like the specifications around who and or what we're hoping in and the work to do it. It sounds like, for me, I believe imagination plays a very essential role in faith development, and or hope. Because again, as you both said, you have to be able to see circumstances beyond what you naturally see. So to have, supernatural vision or insight beyond your actual vision, and helping yourself step back from the situation to see larger or further. And I think that takes imagination. I think as we mature, we lose the ability to imagine, which is connected to play, because we get caught up in systems and functions and producing. And I think at times we forget the work of imagining beyond ourselves, and remembering that God is very much present. I As you all heard, being a former youth pastor, watching children imagine playing with imaginary friends, or imagine a mansion in the house as they're playing, the confidence in which they engage that. I feel like that is what we have to get back to when we are calling ourselves like hope dealers. Like, we have to help others ignite their imagination to be able to see themselves beyond their current circumstances. And I personally think that is the role, all you Black preachers listening, that is your job, to help the people who are listening to see beyond the current circumstances. It is our task to use the language of the day to help people see themselves beyond what's going on and what's happening. And in this season of Advent, where we are bouncing the both and, um, we're not in a place where it's only one sided, where it's all black and white. There are a lot of gray areas, particularly you two in Georgia in the middle of a runoff. Um, and just all of the things that people are navigating and wrestling with. It feels good to still hope in something, to still, yes, we keep hearing the story. Yes, every Christmas we hear the story of Mary's getting ready to have a baby, but it's beyond that. It's to be able, reminding ourselves to hold on to hope, to have to, and what is it, peace and love and joy, to be able to have these moments of remembering that they can exist both and. You don't have to be sad all day. You can have a moment of laughter or joy in the midst of maybe a sad season, or vice versa. And I think that because sometimes people want to live in like a dichotomy, like it's all or nothing, that we don't lean into the complexities of living out our emotions or our thoughts, like Psalm 42. There are peaks and valleys in the psalm, and what you both have shared from both of your disciplines, and the overlapping of the work, particularly for people of color who are really trying to do this thing called
And I
life.
think that's why I think that's part of the genius that our ancestors have left us. When you talked about kind of the gift of imagination and play, our ancestors who were enslaved left us the spirituals,
Mhm.
right? Our ancestors who were lynched and tortured under segregation gave us jazz, right? And so that's, both Dr. G and I were in similar courses with Dr. West. And one of the things that stayed with both of us is, what does it take for a people who have been the
Mhm.
object of hate for centuries to still have the desire to love and
Right.
to still leave? Like, creating art is one of those higher level functions, right? Like
Exactly.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you're trying to survive, you ain't got time to be creative. You just want to
Yep.
survive. But our
Right.
ancestors created art that has literally changed the world.
Yeah.
And we are living in the aftermath of their faith. So what power do we have for the hope for the generations that are coming after us?
Dr. J, watch your tone on this here line, man of God. Watch your tone.
So this is one of the conversations we have that we just
Absolutely.
marvel at, where it's just like, what a legacy, just in terms
Yeah.
of that is not normal in terms
Right.
of when survival is in question,
Mm,
uh, to create
mm.
in
See,
that space.
and this brings us completely full circle, because Thanksgiving dinner, soul food,
Right.
really was the creation of what leftovers of creating this masterful cuisine that has indeed changed the world,
Right.
whether you eat it 3 days later or not. you know Indeed, for sure. And for those of you who are on the line who like, I don't really know, all the spirituals and the Christian, if you know Cardi B or Meg Thee Stallion, they doing the same thing, right? And it's been trending that Glorilla says something that y'all say is like scripture. So just in case you're like, oh, I don't know the spirituals, go listen to one of those tracks. What we're saying is, even in their distress and even in all the things that they were going through, to be able to still create something that anyone else can tune into and identify with, has to be the work of the Holy Ghost.
Yeah, and that there's just the power that's found when one receives the psalm that you quoted earlier, Dominica, about God is a very present help, right? And the Hebrew, there's always love the Hebrew, because it's not that God is a very present, but it's like he's very much like this in the old, that preposition. So it's this sense in which, if you want to find God in that place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's, again, I often say, like, don't believe the devil's hype. And so the hype that God is somehow absent when there's darkness, when there's suffering,
Yeah.
don't ever buy that.
Yeah. Well, beloveds, thank you so much for listening and for tuning in. Thank you for your questions, for engaging, for telling us, what city you are representing, coming on. Don't forget to check out the website for resources. Follow the social media page. We're going to be putting up a question sometime soon to ask your thoughts around naming a portion of the empire that will be coming. But I'm passing this virtual mic to Dr. J as he closes us out. You know, he always giving us a little something, a little extra more. Tonight, y'all need to go ahead and sow a seed because you've gotten like 1,000 preaching nuggets and moments. So, like, you know, go ahead and send your check to P.O. Box.
Yeah, well, no, as always, I have to thank the one and only Reverend Dr. Dominique Robinson for her amazing hosting and keeping us moving forward. I also give a special shout out to Dr. G. She dropped for a moment, but hopefully she'll be back with us before we leave. But if not, you know, I just want to thank her for her wisdom and insight that she shared with us. And as always, there she is. As always, we invite you, if you haven't done so already, to subscribe and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And check out our website at www.jel.institute. Once again, that's www.jel.institute for some of the resources that we've mentioned during our podcast and live editions today for both mental health and some of the we've been doing with respect to Advent season. Also, just a quick reminder that our Hebrew hotline will relaunch again at the top of the year. So January 1st, 2023, amazingly, our Hebrew hotline will relaunch. So it's an opportunity if you want to dive more deeply into the Hebrew scriptures to get insights for sermons or Bibles that are just the own questions you've been wrestling with. You'll be able to schedule time with me through our website. So again, information will be coming out about that soon. Tune into our website and social media platforms to get that. And finally, we're getting to the end of season 2. So I want to give you a special heartfelt thank you for joining us on this journey. We got many more seasons to go by God's grace, but we're winding up season 2. So we'll be back for our final episode, and which will be dropping in December. So keep an eye out for that as we do a wrap up on some Advent pieces. And as we close, I obviously have to give you this little Hebrew nugget. Otherwise, I wouldn't be Dr. J. So it comes from Psalm 42. And I mentioned earlier in that psalm, there's a lot of plays with water. And in verse 7 in the Hebrew, verse 6 in the English translations, there's a phrase that says deep calls into deep. And the word that's used for deep there in Hebrew is the word tehom. The word tehom. So Tehom, tehom. And tehom is the same Hebrew word that appears in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, when the Spirit of God hovers over the deep or the depths. What we know from kind of other ancient Near Eastern languages is that that word tehom is a play on an ancient goddess who was deemed to be a force of chaos and evil. And in Babylonian traditions, it is that monster of chaos, of chaotic waters, that is first destroyed before the gods can create order. And so the psalmist, by talking about deep calls into deep, tehum el tehum kore in Hebrew. Part of what's at stake there is the very chaos of life, those things which seem utterly unmanageable. The psalmist is invoking God's control, even over the chaotic things of life, and that on top of that chaos, God creates order. So it is my prayer that as we go through this Advent season, you'll have a deeper appreciation and a deeper reality for how God doesn't eliminate chaos but caps it. And on the back of what he has capped, God creates order. So it is my prayer that the order we call peace, we call love, we call joy, you'll experience in this season of Advent as God provides, as he always does, just enough light for the stepping on. Thank you. God bless you all. We look forward to seeing you for the finale of season 2 later in December. Take care.